Welcome to PM Ready, your guide to becoming PMP certified. This is a lesson on the Project Management Plan. This lesson covers the Project Management Plan itself, its purpose, key points, contents, key inputs, different tools and techniques for generating the Project Management Plan, all of the subsidiary management plans that are components of the Project Management Plan, as well as all of the other component documents and information that are part of the Project Management Plan. The PMBOK guide defines the Project Management Plan as the document that describes how the project will be executed, monitored and controlled, and closed. As you can see, the Project Management Plan is the key document that defines all of the rules for how the project is going to be managed. As such a key document, it needs to be baselined, at least the project scope, time, and cost, so that the project execution can be measured against these baselines and performance can be managed. However, while it's under development, it doesn't need to be baselined until it's completed. At the end of the planning process is when the project management plan should be baselined. Up until then, there's really no formal process that's required to make changes to the project management plan while it's under development. But once it is baselined, it can only be changed through the Perform Integrated Change Control process. Here are some key points to remember when it comes to putting together the project management plan. First of all, the project charter is the main key document that is used to start off the project management plan. It already has a high-level description of the project across many different aspects and attributes, and those should serve as the starting point for the development of the project management plan. Also keep in mind that the level of detail that's needed in the project management plan depends on the needs of the project. It could be very detailed or simply summary level. The project management plan needs to be as thorough as necessary, but remember that it may change during the course of the project in order to meet the needs of changes to the project environment and conditions. So the project management plan should be created in such a way that it's flexible enough to handle these kinds of changes. Also, you don't start the project management plan from scratch. You have the project charter, of course, but the project operates in an environment of a program and portfolio and other organizational governance. Many of the rules for managing projects may already be defined within this context, and you should consult with your PMO or the program or the portfolio in order to find out what those rules are and to make sure that your project management plan is consistent with and uses those rules. Development of the project management plan is part of the integration management knowledge area. This is because this plan integrates all of the other individual plans of all of the other knowledge areas, from scope, cost, schedule, quality, and so on. All of these other plans are considered components of the larger project management plan. As the project manager, it is your responsibility to lead the development of the project management plan. You can delegate different components to different individuals and groups that have specialized knowledge or training as much as you need to, but you cannot delegate the overall responsibility for leading the development of this plan. The project management plan is developed during planning, right after initiation, in which the project charter and stakeholder register are created. What's in the project management plan? To start with, it contains a complete management plan for each of the other knowledge areas. This includes scope, schedule, cost, quality, resource, communications, risk, and the procurement management plans, as well as the stakeholder engagement plan. In addition to complete plans for each of the other 9 knowledge areas, project management plan also includes the requirements management plan, the change management plan, the configuration management plan, as well as a description of the project lifecycle, a description of the approach that will be used for development, as well as rules and guidelines for when and how management will review the project. It also includes baselines for the scope, schedule, and cost, at least those. There may be other baselines, as well as the performance measurement baseline, which is used in earned value analysis. It's also worth noting that there are a lot of important project documents that are not part of the project management plan itself. These other project documents include things like the project schedule, calendars, team assignments, quality metrics, the requirements documentation, the resource requirements, schedule forecasts, the team charter, and many other documents. Notice that many, though not all, of these other project documents are generated during project executing, monitoring, and controlling. By the way, notice that I use the word executing rather than execution. This is my deliberate attempt to help you learn the official PMI terminology, because the process group is called the executing process group, not the execution process group. The scope-related management plans that are part of the project management plan include the scope management plan and the requirements management plan. Notice that these are not the same thing and that there is a distinct difference between them. The scope management plan describes how the scope will be defined, developed, monitored, controlled, and validated. Whereas the requirements management plan describes how requirements, not the scope, but the requirements, will be analyzed, documented, and managed. The difference here is that the requirements management plan is more of a business analysis plan for how you'll do the business analysis work of determining what the requirements are and how you'll then manage those requirements. So this is a part of the scope, but specifically for the requirements that the key stakeholders and users have requested. Next comes the schedule management plan, which establishes the criteria and the activities for developing, monitoring, and controlling the schedule. Then comes the cost management plan, which describes how costs will be planned, structured, and controlled. You should begin to see a pattern here in these management plans, and that is that these plans describe the rules, if you will, for how the project will be managed, but don't include the details of the project, such as the project schedule or the project budget. Those are separate documents. Next, we have the quality management plan, which describes how applicable policies, procedures, and guidelines will be implemented to achieve the quality objectives. Notice here, by the way, that it references applicable policies and procedures and guidelines, meaning that these may well come from your portfolio or program or PMO. Then we have the resource management plan, which describes how the project resources are acquired, allocated, monitored, and controlled. As with the quality plan, notice that you will likely need to consult with HR or others in order to make sure that your plan is consistent with your organization's policies about how people and resources are acquired, allocated, monitored, and controlled. Then comes the communications management plan, which describes how, when, and by whom information about the project will be administered and disseminated. The procurement management plan describes how a project team will acquire goods and services from outside the performing organization. The risk management plan describes how risk management activities will be structured and performed. And finally, the stakeholder engagement plan. Notice the word engagement. They don't use the term stakeholder management plan, but rather stakeholder engagement. The stakeholder engagement plan identifies the strategies and actions required to promote productive involvement of stakeholders in the project and in decision making. Each of these management plans includes the rules for managing that area of the project. It excludes the details of the project. For example, the scope management plan includes how the scope will be managed, but doesn't include the actual scope of the project. The requirements management plan defines how requirements will be managed, but doesn't list the requirements. Same for schedule, cost, risks, stakeholders, and so on. These plans are about how, not about what. Once you've finished planning the scope, schedule, and cost of the project, those should be baselined, which means they should be reviewed, approved, and not changed without going through the perform change control process. These baselines will be used to compare the plan to the actual results of the project. There's also a performance measurement baseline, which is an integration of the scope, schedule, and cost baseline that is unique to earned value analysis, and we'll get to that in other lessons. Now, those are the minimum components that should be baselined, but there may be others. For example, you may need to baseline the quality requirements and make sure that those are not changed without proper approval and without going through the perform integrated change control process. Other components of the project management plan include the change management plan, which includes the rules for how changes will be reviewed and approved, the configuration management plan, which defines how changes will be made and managed, the project lifecycle, which defines the particular lifecycle that you've chosen for the project. We'll get to that more later. The development approach, which according to the PMBOK guide is one of a few different categories of approach: predictive, agile, iterative, incremental, or hybrid, as well as management reviews, which is basically just the schedule of the planned management reviews during the course of the project. It may help you to remember all of the different components that are part of the project management plan if you can think about the fact that there are basically three types of components. One is the rules, which is represented by all of these different management plans. The other is the baselines, the scope, schedule, cost, performance, and any other baselines. And then there's the other category, which includes things like the life cycle, the development approach, and the management reviews. How is the project management plan used? It is your guide for how the project is to be implemented, managed, monitored, controlled, and closed. It's basically your rule book for how you're going to manage the project. This is the key document for managing the project. It's the document that you will refer to on a daily basis. The project charter is also important as it provides kind of a high-level elevator statement view of the project and is useful for communication with other key stakeholders. But the details of how you're going to manage the project are in the project management plan. Now we come to the develop project management plan process. The inputs include the project charter, of course, because it has a lot of high-level details that need to be used as your starting point. It also has as inputs the outputs of other processes. This comes from two areas. One, from those processes that develop all of these other subsidiary plans, like the scope management plan and the cost management plan and so on. But also, as there are changes during the project, those changes will need to be incorporated as necessary into the project management plan. Those are two ways in which outputs from other processes can be inputs to this process. There are also inputs that come from enterprise environmental factors, as well as organizational process assets. And we'll cover those in some detail in the next slide. Some of the enterprise environmental factors that can affect or influence the development of the project management plan and its details include things like government or industry standards or requirements that you need to comply with. You should also consider the project management body of knowledge for the particular industry applicable to this project, as well as any applicable specialties such as safety. You'll also need to operate within the organizational governance, structure, practices, and culture of your organization. And you should make sure that you are aware of and take advantage of the infrastructure that's available to you, whether it's physical assets or IT infrastructure or whatever. As for organizational process assets, your organization will likely have all kinds of templates and policies and processes and procedures that you can use to help you put together a project management plan and not have to do it from scratch. You should also consult your organization's historical information and lessons learned contained in your lessons learned repository. Hopefully, your organization will have templates for the project management plan and all of its other component plans, or at least some samples of previous plans. The tools and techniques for developing the project management plan fall into four broad categories: expert judgment, data gathering, interpersonal and team skills, and meetings. Over the next few slides, we'll cover each of these in a bit of detail. Expert judgment is about more than just you exercising expert judgment as you plan and manage this project. It also includes the need for you to proactively seek out and take advantage of the expert judgment of others. There may be others in your organization and outside your organization that have some expertise that they can apply and help you with all kinds of things, such as tailoring the project management processes, developing some of the additional components. For example, you may have some environmental impact to be managed, and you could seek out and use the services of someone who's an expert in environmental impact. Also, other project managers and others will help you in determining some of the tools and techniques you should use and some of the technical and management details that you should be aware of. Also, in determining what resources and skill levels are needed. Also, you may find experts in configuration management or change management, as well as people who have expertise in prioritizing project work. The data gathering category of tools and techniques includes brainstorming, checklists, focus groups, and interviews. You may well use others as well, but these are the ones that are specifically mentioned in the PMBOK guide. And don't worry, we'll cover these in more depth in later lessons. The interpersonal and team skills category includes conflict management, facilitation, and meeting management, as well as potentially others. The meetings category includes meetings in which you could discuss the project approach, determine how the work will be done, and establish how the work will be monitored and controlled. It will also generally include a kickoff meeting at the end of planning and the beginning of executing the project, in which you'll communicate the project objectives to the key stakeholders, gain their commitment, explain the roles and responsibilities of each stakeholder, and formally kick off the project. And now it's time for a brief quiz. How much can you remember of what is included in the project management plan? Take a moment and see how much you can remember. So, how did you do? It includes the 9 subsidiary plans, the requirements management plan, change and configuration management plans, the project life cycle description, the development approach, the schedule of management reviews, the baselines for scope, schedule, cost, and the integrated performance measurement baseline. Plus baselines and other components, and pointed out that it excludes business documents that came before initiating the project, such as the needs analysis, the business case, and the benefits management plan. It also excludes project documents such as the schedule, the calendars, the requirements, forecasts, team charter, and so on that contain the specific information about what the project is going to do, as well as the project charter, which also precedes the project management plan. For more information about the project management plan, you can refer to the PMBOK guide on pages 82 through 89, as well as the glossary. PM Ready is a publication of PM Guaranteed and is based on the Project Management Institute's PMBOK guide.